Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be no fancy editing and no background music. Instead, I'm just going to go through everything I've done to go from broke college kid who dropped out at 18 to a relatively successful freelancer slash agency owner over the last kind of 5.5 years. And hopefully this will be helpful for you if you're on a similar journey. And honestly, hopefully it'll also be helpful for me because I'm currently at one of those stages where I feel like I have a few different options of different paths to go down. So hopefully just kind of summarizing this journey will be helpful for both of us. Now, really most of this starts when I was kind of 16, 17, and this is where I first kind of figured out that I wanted to build a business. And that was through reading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which I know is incredibly cliche, but before that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was the kind of kid who just had no idea at school what it was that they wanted to follow, no subjects that they really liked that much, and spent most of my time just playing video games or playing sport. Once I actually found this stuff, this was kind of at the stage where I'd left high school and was moving on to college. I became absolutely obsessed with it. And when I say I was obsessed, I mean like properly obsessed with it. I was reading every single book I possibly could and listening to all of the different podcasts I could, which were pretty much like Tim Ferriss and all those gurus around that time. And then also there was this like one book called like How to Be Fucking Awesome or something. It sounds really cringe, but that was also one of those ones where I read this and this guy was like a copywriter, freelancer, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a really good path to follow. And that was my first introduction into freelancing, into building a business, and that whole aspect of how to gain freedom. Now, at this point, I became so obsessed with everything, I really didn't focus at all on college. I started skipping classes. I really didn't make many friends at this time. I just focused on spending my time listening to podcasts. I had a long commute. It was about 2-3 hours a day to kind of get there and back. So I was just listening to podcasts, reading books, not really talking to many people, just trying to consume everything I could. And then when I got home, I was trying to do a bunch of different things. Those things like trying to build affiliate blogs and really just focusing on how can I gain some form of freedom. And when it got to my 18th birthday, which in the UK, you have to legally stay in some form of education until you're at least 18, I quit college on that day. And the reason I was able to quit college then was because I kind of agreed with my parents that I would follow an online course, still doing some form of education, but I knew that I really just wanted to figure out how to build a business. So my plan was to do that online course. It was in economics. I was then gonna work part-time at a couple of jobs that I had, and then spend all the rest of my time working on some businesses. This stage was pretty chaotic. I tried to build a bunch of different businesses, and all of them failed to varying degrees. Initially, I focused so much on trying to build different affiliate blogs. So at the time, I was really kind of bought into being a blogger and trying to be someone who built a blog that made money through ads and then also affiliates. None of that really took off very well, but I did kind of have some basic success in terms of like, that's probably where I earned my first dollar online. But when I say I earned my first dollar, I probably spent like hundreds of hours and worked out at like, I don't know, 20p an hour maybe maximum. After kind of getting a little bit bored with the whole blogging thing, I tried drop shipping. That didn't last very long. I didn't really kind of get into that too much, but that was another thing I tried. And then I also tried to build a YouTube channel, which makes me cringe a lot when I look back at that, especially the way I looked back then. Like I had facial hair, but it was like just like a weird little line going around. And yeah, it was pretty bad. And when I look back at it now, I'm like, okay, that was a great period of time because I learned all these skills. But when you are in that and when you are trying everything you possibly can, it doesn't feel like you're learning because everything is failing to varying degrees. So at that point when I gave up my dreams to be this YouTuber because I realized that I couldn't really create content on business and entrepreneurship when I actually had no experience with business or entrepreneurship, I decided I should probably try do something which was a little bit easier to get into. So I kind of fell into the idea of trying to be a freelancer. And with that, I wanted to be a freelance copywriter. So what I did was build a website, did all kind of the typical things that you would do. So build out a bit of a portfolio, try to get a few clients and really just do everything I possibly could to get those first few clients and get some traction, get things off the ground. But nothing was really taking off. I spent a lot of time just perfecting my portfolio and doing all the unimportant things. And what I later realized is that I actually did enjoy writing, but I really didn't enjoy writing for other people. And I also wasn't that good at it. So at this point, I was contemplating kind of quitting the path. I was contemplating getting like a normal 9-to-5 job and trying to focus on just earning some money and moving out of my parents' house. But instead, what I did is I just decided, okay, maybe I'll give it one more try and I'll try pivot into something and hopefully this will take off. So it was around this stage that I realized that all I really needed was was to gain some form of freedom. It didn't have to be the thing that I wanted to do forever, but it just had to be the thing that got me from living in my parents' house, not having any real skills, not having any real business experience, because I was so interested in it, but it's very difficult to talk about business when you have never done business and never done any of this kind of thing. So when I listed out all the skills that I'd learned, I realized that writing was one of the skills I'd learned, but then also design and building websites was another thing. With building those blogs and even building like affiliate sites and building drop shipping, all this kind of thing have one thing in common, and that is designing and building websites. Now, I wasn't an expert and I wasn't amazing at this, but I felt like I was pretty good and I also enjoyed doing it. So what I decided to do was become a freelance web designer. Now, at the time, I didn't actually know how to code. I only knew how to build websites in Squarespace and then also on WordPress using those little page builders. Now, I hated WordPress at the time, so I went all in on being a Squarespace web designer. Again, same as copywriting, I just did all the same things. I built out the portfolio, I started working on my skills, trying to get better at it. And then eventually I got to a stage where I started cold pitching people, tried to get my first few clients, and again, nothing happened. And this was a point where I realized maybe it wasn't my skills, maybe it wasn't the freelancing thing that was the problem. It was the way I was approaching it. It was me that was the problem. And what I mean by this is it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't good enough at this thing. It was the way I was approaching trying to get my first few clients. See, I was doing something that I see beginner freelancers and people trying to build businesses, I see them do it all the time, and that is fooling yourself into thinking you're doing the correct work. See, at the time, what I was doing is I was always changing my portfolio. Maybe I'd be rewriting the website, maybe I'd be working on some more portfolio pieces, maybe occasionally I'd send off a cold email or two and try get some clients, and I would kind of fool myself into thinking that I was trying really, really hard to get my first few freelance clients. But ultimately, I think I was actually probably a little bit scared to get those first few clients. So instead, what I was doing is I was just doing that busy work, the things that weren't actually going to get me those first few clients and weren't going to build any momentum. It sounds kind of stupid, but I think in the beginning, most people are actually kind of scared to succeed. So it got to a point where I was really frustrated because I hadn't got any clients for a little while. I was trying very hard, even though I wasn't actually focusing on the correct things. So I had a mini meltdown and I kind of went through this phase of deciding, do I want to quit again, or do I want to actually go all in and try and make this a success? Luckily, I decided I was going to continue working on it. And I just focused on a few core things at this point. And this is when I realized all I had to do was figure out what my offering was. So make sure it was very clear what it was I was offering and what the benefits were, who it was I was going to help. So what kind of businesses should I be targeting? Who should I be trying to get in front of? And then it was all about just finding my first few clients and finding a way to build some momentum. So for me at the time, what that was posting on Instagram, posting on LinkedIn, posting on Twitter, cold emailing people, using platforms like Upwork, and really just trying to get the word out as much as possible. Now at the time, because I was only 18 and I didn't really have like a network of people who owned businesses or anyone to email to hopefully give me work, I was kind of at a bit of a disadvantage because when people first go freelance, everyone says tap into your existing network. But when you don't have an existing network, you kind of just have to put as much out there as possible to get your first chance. Now, a couple of things that worked really well for me were a few of these cold emails, which got me a little bit of work, a little bit of traction. Most of these were very small projects in the beginning, but the only thing that mattered were actually just doing a little bit of work, figuring out how to interact with clients and initially getting paid for something. Now, another thing that actually worked really well for me to get my first few clients was using Upwork. Now, people always kind of hate on Upwork, and I get it because most of the time it is a race to the bottom and it's not a great place to be as a freelancer. I don't run my business on this at all now, but what I initially did, this was especially when I was kind of early in my kind of process of working on Squarespace, was I priced myself quite low on the platform and I just put a lot of effort into getting a few jobs. Most of these were very small projects. They were kind of like fixing something. Maybe it was a tiny bit of custom code that I could figure out by just Googling. And the sole purpose of this was just to get some good reviews on Upwork. All I tried to do was just get a bunch of 5-star reviews. And then once I had a bit of a base on the platform, I just flipped my prices to be one of the highest earners in that space. Now, the idea behind this was that I saw every few days there would be a really well-priced project, which actually seemed like something I wanted to do. And it's very difficult to stand out, but one of the big signals to clients is if your price is higher and they have a higher priced job and you also have 5-star reviews, then they're much more likely to talk to you. And because then I flipped over to only applying for those larger jobs, those larger projects, what happened was I was able to put a lot more effort into those proposals. I'd create Loom videos kind of talking about how I would actually approach a project and the different things that I would do to help solve their problems, which then led into getting on a call with them, which then led into actually getting the project. Now, I didn't even need to land that many big projects from this, because what it did is it started the flywheel, it started some momentum, and these were the kind of projects that could actually sustain me. Now, it was around this time I started getting very frustrated with Squarespace, because I realized that I wanted to actually work with startups and kind of tech companies, and Squarespace is not a great place for that because it's not overly customizable. Luckily, at the time I found Webflow, and I realized that Webflow seemed to be kind of this emerging technology, this emerging platform, which combined perfectly for me because it had the visual aspect of building visually, but then it also had the flexibility of actually building with code, because where Squarespace creates this kind of environment for you to work within, it creates these blocks which are abstract from code, so abstract from HTML and CSS. What Webflow does is it just creates a visual way for you to write HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. So when I jumped into that and everything clicked, I just jumped straight into Webflow and tried to learn everything I possibly could. And another sign for me that it was a good time to jump into Webflow is that there was a lot of startups starting to move over to this platform. They were focusing very heavily on marketing teams and being this platform where marketing teams can easily edit their websites. So I decided this was a very good place to be, and I would bet on actually being one of these early experts on the platform. This is one of those things where people often talk about trying to align yourself with an emerging market. It's very easy to grow and it's very easy to have some form of success if the market that you're in is expanding. Now, if you think about it, if the market is expanding, that naturally means that your business should expand with the market. But if the market is getting smaller, if people are leaving this ecosystem, then that means that you need to be at the very, very top level to have a successful business. It doesn't mean that it's not possible, but it is much easier if you're in a space that is expanding. For example, right now, I would maybe jump on Framer. I would maybe still go with Webflow because I still think that the ecosystem is expanding, but Framer is something that is emerging. A lot of tech companies seem to like that. So if I was in this position right now, then maybe I would learn Framer and go all in on that. Now, in terms of freelancing or building an agency, I really think the most important part is getting over that initial hurdle of getting those first few clients, because once that happens, you start to build a flywheel. Now, at this stage, I'm a year or two into freelancing and things are really starting to pick up. I'm getting a lot more inbound from other clients that I've previously worked with, which ends up actually being the best source of referrals. If people you are working with previously are recommending you to other people, then the chances are they're gonna wanna work with you, and it's easier to charge more for those projects. Now, for the next couple of years, because that flywheel had already started, it became a lot easier just to go heads down and really focus on grinding out client projects and just working and working and working and getting better at Webflow, getting better at design. And while that is difficult work and it's not necessarily easy to continue to under-promise and over-deliver, it is much easier once you have that base momentum. For me, the hardest part was always getting those first few clients. Once I started to get those slightly larger projects, which are the kind of ones that I wanted to work on, everything became a lot easier and it just became this routine of focusing on continuing to grow. Now, at this stage, I'm probably 21, 22, and I start to get a little bit distracted by some other things. So at this point, I've been freelancing for maybe about 3 years, and I start to realize that I maybe want to branch out into some different things. Now, I wasn't entirely sure what it was that I wanted to do, so I started to experiment with some content. Initially, I started a newsletter, which is called The Sunday Filter. I still write that now. And then I also delved back into YouTube, which is this YouTube channel. Once I started creating content, I quickly realized that I did really enjoy creating content, but it is quite difficult to build a freelance business and consistently create content. If you look back at this YouTube channel, it has been quite sporadic with my uploads for the last couple of years because it's quite difficult to balance the two. When you're a freelancer, you ultimately have a job. You're not necessarily an entrepreneur, someone who kind of tells other people what to do. You're the person who gets the work, and then you're also the person who fulfills the work. So as I experimented with content, and as I still experiment with content, I've also experimented a couple times with starting to scale an agency. Now, I've had a couple false starts in the past where I started building out an agency, started working with people, working with freelancers, bringing people on more full time. but then ended up going back to being a freelancer, mainly because at the time I just didn't feel ready to manage other people. And another thing that also kind of skewed me towards being this solo freelancer, solopreneur, was also seeing just a lot of people talking about how great it is to be a solopreneur. But I don't really agree with that anymore, because being a solopreneur is not really a great life, because you end up being the only person who is doing the work, but you also don't have a team to work with, and it actually is a good thing to work with other people. But that's a separate thing. While I've experimented with all these different things over the last few years, that's really been from about 21 to 23 where I am now, I've kind of landed on the idea that I want to start building a team. So this whole freelancing thing is really good, but I think ultimately a lot of value comes in actually building a team and working with other people. For me, I have worked completely solo since I was 17, 18, just doing everything in my own bedroom or in my own office by myself, just at a computer, not really collaborating with many people other than giving client updates. So currently what I'm focusing on is building out my freelance business into more of an agency. This agency will be essentially what I focus on in the day-to-day, and that will continue doing what I've been doing for quite a long time now, which is designing and building websites for startups, because I kind of just believe that people are always going to need websites designed and built for startups. And I think it's a very valuable skill to have and a very valuable service to offer. It's one of those things where people talk about the emergence of AI and people being able to just build a website with AI, it's like, you haven't seen how good those websites are. They're not great. They are just basic websites which kind of fill out things. And I just don't think this skill is really going to go away anytime soon, because people are always going to need custom websites. They're always going to need a way to market themselves. They're always going to need a way to show off their services, their products, all that kind of thing. But what I want to do now is remove myself as a bottleneck from everything and start to enable a team to build that. Seth Godin has a really great article where he talks about the difference between being a freelancer and being an entrepreneur. And in that, he says that freelancers are the ones who do the work and entrepreneurs are the ones who enable people to do the work. Now, freelancing is great. It has got me to a position where I'm earning a very comfortable 6-figure income, but now feels like the right time to move beyond freelancing into entrepreneurship. And with that becomes content like this. I want to build out a team to help me create content more consistently, and then also have the team at Demandflow to help people build better websites and build better businesses. Now with this content side of things, what I really want to focus on is creating content around entrepreneurship and self-development. So with that, it really just becomes how to start a business and how to positively impact your life through starting businesses. So that's stories and kind of resources on how to start a business, how to go from 0 to 1 in some form of entrepreneurship. And then also the self-development piece, which is just improving your life or improving the quality of your life. So the next decade, that is my focus. That is the infinite game. It is focusing on 2 areas. It is how do we help people become entrepreneurs? How do we help people live better lives? And then on the agency side of things is how do you help businesses actually grow through their website? Now this has been a very rambly video and a little bit different to normal. So if you enjoyed it, then let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any questions about getting started or anything that I've kind of covered in this video, let me know in the comments and I'll try to get back to you.